Set. Oh, hold on. It says it's being live streamed, but then it's still giving me the loading in the middle,
Yeah.
so. Okay, we are live on YouTube.
Okay, call to order Berlin Finance Committee. All right, first item, the minutes for last week. Do we have a motion for the minutes of January 29th?
I'll make that motion.
I second it.
All right, any other discussion on those minutes? All right, roll call, Scott, aye.
IDI.
Cliff, I.
All right, minutes pass 3-0. All right, next item is I'll let you and Heidi fight it out. Who's gonna take the minutes for tonight? Who wants to volunteer? It shouldn't be that.
I will
difficult.
do it tonight.
Okay, thank you.
Because Mary did it a couple of meetings and I'm feeling obligated. I will say don't have any expectations about what they're gonna look like, okay? Just,
Just go take a look at
yeah.
her previous ones.
Here comes Mary.
Can I ask a question
Yeah.
before I start taking this? Does she take them right on like an email and out? Because we get them as an email. Is she doing it as a doc? I don't know how she does.
She usually does it as a Word doc and typing it in as we go,
Okay.
but you can do it however
No, I
is
will do a Word doc,
comfortable.
that's fine.
I was gonna say, I think she just sent you one.
Yes, she sent. You have the draft from January 29th.
You get my Microsoft Word running on an Apple. That's a bit of a challenge.
And then we'll just do the one other piece. We just had mail. Just the Central Massachusetts Mosquito Control Project assessments. So I'll pass it around, but obviously Kristen's already been copied on this. So the Berlin, while their total budget is going up 5%, and then it has Berlin's assessment, which is preliminary budget of $43,602. Look at that.
And what does that include for a service? What are they?
It's the mosquito
Do they, like,
control.
Take samples and spray and.
But I know they do spray. I'm assuming they do type of samples. I don't know.
It all depends on where the infestation or concern areas are, but yes, they will spray if it is merited based on what they're seeing. And they will typically put that information out to us so we can push it out if we're one of the communities that they're needing to do that in. And it really depends on kind of what's going on at any given time, so. I think that clock is wrong, Cliff, if that's what you're looking at. You made a funny
When he
face,
called it to
so.
order.
No. It was probably like around
7:35.
7:36 right now. It's probably right around 7:32.
Okay. Chair says 7:32.
All right, and the next item is we have CPAC. Tim, you come forward.
Good morning.
Good afternoon.
Wide awake.
Yeah, it shows it now.
So,
I do not have a display for it, just so.
Oh, there's nothing to display.
yeah, we're not into that display stuff, are we, June?
Okay.
No. I can give you a quick rundown of what's gonna happen at town meeting. So our surcharge generated about $347,000, and then the match from the state this year was 46%, which means we got about 160,000. So all told, that gives us 517 and some change.
The match was what percentage you said?
46.
46, okay.
Yeah, there were 17 towns out of the 200 that are participating in CPA that got a higher percentage match. But a number of those are very tiny little towns, and as a result, dollar-wise, of the town, of those towns that got a higher percentage, only 5 got more money than we did, and only by a small amount. So we're still performing very well as a result of the 3%.
Can I ask you to repeat those numbers again, please?
So we generated $347,600 internally. We were matched with 159,662, which was 46%. So that gives us 517,262, and 10% of that is required to go to 3 different buckets: historic preservation, open space and rec, and community development, housing. And so that means each one of those buckets will get $51,726, which is similar to what's been happening for a while. Last year we generated a little less, but basically $50,000 goes into each one of those accounts. And then 5% can go to administrative efforts, which, if it isn't used, it goes back into the general fund that we hold. The money that's allocated to the 10% buckets stays there until it's expended. So it's in a safe place for those 3 categories. That means about 25,000 would go into administrative expenses. We, of course, have an administrative assistant, Maureen, who has put us on the map in terms of, the work that we do. She's really aggressive about trying to figure out what's going on in other communities, particularly some of the ones that have been in it for a long time. So, she's really been able to say, there's some opportunities that we should take advantage of that some of these other towns that know more than we do have already accomplished. And then with that administrative money, if there were to be a land purchase, for instance, and there needed to be an appraisal, the administrative money could come out of that fund and support that effort. And then, like I said, any money that isn't used goes back into the general fund at the end of the year. The remainder of the funds, after the 10% is taken out for the 3 and the 5% for administrative, goes into what we call budgeted reserve, which means there'll be somewhere around 336,000 that'll go into that. And that is money that, if we really needed to later in the year, for instance, after we close the books, it could be available. So if you had a fall town meeting and you had a significant land purchase that you really wanted to capture, that money would be available. Now, in the past, when we've used some of this money, for instance, the money to buy Horseshoe Pond, we were able to apply for a state grant, and we got $850,000 back into CPA. So we're really encouraging folks to leverage the money whenever they possibly can, use it as a match. And that certainly worked out well in that particular instance.
Tim, the approximately 335,000 in that budgeted reserve, that is no longer pointed at any of the 3 uses. So it's any uses.
Fair game,
Yeah,
right?
okay.
So this year, we have 3 projects that we voted on last night to support. And that means that we'll write up warrant articles that'll place them on the town meeting warrant for May. The first is $30,000 to create a parking lot at Lyman Street site at Horseshoe Pond, so that people can get off the thoroughfare and have a safe place to park, and then from there proceed into the property. that figure we believe is probably high, but given some of the things that have happened with the federal government recently in regard to tariffs and whatever, it's hard to anticipate what material costs are going to be, particularly lumber. And so as a result, because there are some material costs involved in this project, we went a little bit high. But any funds that aren't expended would come back into CPA. The next project is from the Historic Commission. They're asking for 13,500 to do an assessment and evaluation of the historic clothing collection that the town has, which is pretty significant. It's a major part of the town's collection. And because of space constraints, I think the Historic Commission is trying to do more of a thorough analysis of what we've got in the collection and get some expert advice as to how to sort of de-accession some of the things that they've got in the collection. And so this person would work with them over the course of a year, or just about a year, starting sometime in probably the mid part of the summer, if this is approved. And as a result, you know, they get some good guidance as to how to determine what pieces ought to be retained and what pieces ought to be passed on. And I think that'll serve probably as a model for them to use in some of the other pieces they've got in the collection, and how to determine what they can hold on to and what they can't. Because it's clear, I think, to the commission that the collection is sizable, space is limited, pieces will continue to be offered to the commission and the town. And as a result, they need to be far more systematic about, you know, what they accept. I think their rules right now say pretty much anything that they're given, they're sort of obliged to take, and that's not sustainable. So this will help them in that process. And then the final project is $10,000. And again, I think this figure is high. But again, it's necessary probably to make sure that there's adequate funds available. And this is from the 1870 town hall in order to figure out a strategy to get into the main door from the street, for not handicap access, but for folks with a little limited capacity to go up those steps. So it would be some adjustments to the steps to make them safer for everybody, but then also an assessment as to how to get into the town hall from the front door, probably using the side closest to the front side closest to Faith's. And that's for design, with the hope that if we can come up with a good handle on how to move forward, that would allow us to figure out a strategy how to implement the modifications so you could get greater access.
And, so the money is for an assessment.
It's for design.
Okay.
Yep.
Thank you. I apologize.
No, that's fine. So the Horseshoe Pond piece would come out of open space and rec, and the other two would come out of historic preservation. Our habit has been to avoid using any funds that we anticipate in a given year, and only use funds that we've got in hand. And so last year, any of the anticipated funds that came in, we didn't expend. And as a result, those we have now, and it's from those funds that we'd be taking these three projects. Because essentially you'd have, 23,500 from historic preservation and 30,000 from open space, and both those 10% buckets are in excess of that. So we can easily pull the money from those accounts. One of the things you've asked us to do in the past is to anticipate what some of the long-term costs might be in regard to any of these projects. So, I mean, the historic preservation one regarding clothing is probably going to benefit the town in that it helps us secure a collection that's probably more indicative of what took place in Berlin, but it also relieves us potentially of some of the pressure we've got for space, which could help. But there wouldn't be any long-term expense as a result of that project. The 1870 Town Hall is basically designed to try to figure out a strategy to, implement better access. So it's really going to be in the second phase that we anticipate some long-term maintenance issues. But again, those would probably be fairly minimal. I mean, it's someone shoveling the steps or the access, that sort of thing. So it's not significant. And the Horseshoe Pond one, the parking lot, I think we'd have to ask ourselves, Highway probably would be sliding through there with a snowplow if when they were passing through that particular part of town. So again, we don't anticipate significant long-term maintenance or replacement costs for any of these projects compared to some of the things that, like some of the work on the South Common that REC has proposed over the last couple of cycles.
Tim, can I ask you again for the dollar amount on the parking lot? I'm sorry.
It's 30 right now.
Okay, thank you.
So the highway town is already doing snow removal with the 1870, and the Horseshoe property would be
Yeah,
small additional.
yeah. It's obviously an expense, but it's not an expense that's significant in our minds anyway. What did I forget, June?
You good?
Really? I think I can tell Janet I did all right.
Yes.
Okay.
Any more questions on these three projects?
Where is the lot? Is it right at the corner there?
I think
Lyman, London, or is it further up London?
it's probably going to be where the driveway was for access to the Lyman School.
So McGrail
When-
old house.
When
Yeah.
that house was there.
Take a left
Uh,
and 500 feet,
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
like right there.
Where
So
we
across-
see cars parked
yeah,
on
Parked
right
a
now.
across
regular
the
basis.
aqueduct.
Okay.
Ah,
I mean, you got a flat area, it's easy
Yes.
in and out, you got sight distance, it's not on the curve. There's all sorts of benefits to using that. It's less driven than Linden, although it's busy compared, right? It's busier than when you were a young lass, right?
But there's still plenty of cars that are parked on the side of the road. that-
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it makes things safer.
thanks.
I have a question coming up from last week. Library had indicated they had come forward with part of their project that they thought could be part of CPAC. I think they said it was around like 11 or 13,000. They said it was rejected because everything has to be outside.
So if you want to apply for open space or rec, it can't be interior, it has to be outside.
Really? Okay. One of the examples I was giving, well, actually, I'll adjust it just a little bit, but I know, a few years ago, like one of the first things they did was the new scoreboard for baseball, for youth baseball. So basically, if youth basketball comes forward, they are out of luck because it's indoors.
That's a good question. Yeah, that's the way I'd interpret it.
Okay.
Then we suggested, well, the building is historic. Might we pursue that course?
Yeah, we
But
talked about
then you
that,
opened up
yeah.
a can of worms in terms of trying to meet all the federal guidelines for historic preservation. 19 Carter came with a proposal as well, and as a 501c3, a nonprofit applying for CPA money, but again, the land wasn't controlled by the town or protected in a permanent fashion. And so it loses its eligibility as a result. And that's one of the things that I think we're going to try to investigate a little further and try to determine exactly how protected South Common is in our eyes. Because the goal is not to use CPA money on a project that might be discontinued in a short period of time. For instance, if you were to spend money on the soccer fields and the irrigation, and then you decide to build a library on that parcel in 5 years, was the land protected enough so the investment has a life expectancy that's reasonable? So there's all these wrinkles that we keep, coming up with. A couple other wrinkles are, we asked the question recently, if a 501c3 were to utilize through some arrangement with the town, a town property, could they then apply for CPA money? And would they be required to meet the prevailing wage requirement? And it seems as though there's an opportunity there not to have to pay prevailing wage if it's a 501c3 in certain cases. So their advice was talk to town council, but you began to say to yourself, okay, well, if you wanted to do things, for instance, with the 1870 town hall, and the town decided it didn't want to manage the operation in terms of scheduling events and that sort of thing, and a 501c3 operated it on behalf of the town, that 501c3 then could apply for CPA money to do some of the modifications and not have to pay prevailing wage. And so you might extend the value of the CPA funds by being able to do things less expensively. So, there's a bunch of things that we can think about. One of the other issues, we talked about having the highway department possibly doing the work at the Horseshoe Pond parking lot. And I think we came up with a proposal where they might receive time and a half, not outside of their work, and be able to do the work that way. But we asked the consortium for CPA about that one, and they said that's a tricky one and you might want to avoid that option. So then your opportunity is, can you find a sole proprietor who might do the work? And sole proprietors aren't required, as I understand it, to pay prevailing wage. So, there's a lot of nuances here. So we keep learning things every time we meet, it seems like.
Well, I was like, say, I want to just get clarification on that outdoor
library.
stuff. If that is a case that we move forward consistently being that, as opposed to, like I say, here's a good example, I think, of somebody could come forward and then 3 years down the road, that's all of a sudden being approved and you're going, well, wait a second, why were they a no? Unless legislation somehow, showing that it truly was not allowed and legislation changed.
Yeah. No, we felt badly about that one because the library was a logical way to use CPA money for some of the work that they wanted to do there, but it didn't fit into those qualifications
Okay.
this time. So
And following up in this whole, not about basketball, but about doors and historical stuff. Do you have a sense of where the term historical, what's the definition?
historical,
Yeah, for the CPA purposes, do they lift it out of some other context? Is it feel it out and make it up as you go? What is, how do we define historic?
I don't know. I don't want to jump into that one
Well, let me make
because
a
it's
little,
tricky. It's all, whenever I go into the CPA rules and regs and the legislation and stuff
Yeah.
like that, there's been some modification since it was first, developed 20 years ago or 25 years ago, but there's a lot of gray area in my mind.
That's always the case.
Yeah,
But the town historic, use in terms of a building is 50 years, right?
I don't know. Yeah, I haven't seen them. I can go back and look, but I haven't seen them pin a date on some of them. You know, what does
Well,
make it
Think of the
historic
building, if you want to demo a building, it's more than 50 years old, you need to sign off from the historic.
from the historic commission? Yeah,
I know that because I just experienced it a
Yeah.
couple years ago. So that's why I asked, what's the definition?
Yeah.
And because the library is 1920, whatever, right?
yeah. The library fits in.
At least the town
But then
definition.
the question is, you know, is it, there's some question as to, is it on the National Register? Or then there's another stipulation that says the Historic Commission of the town can determine that it's historic. That's my recollection anyway. And because we talked about that as we were looking at the definitions, and we thought, okay, so what criteria would they use?
Mhm.
And that's, you know, probably a challenge that, you know, we may very well as a committee ask the Historic Commission to work on that definition in case we're asked to come up with the parameters that would be necessary, you know, going down the road sometime.
Well, to Scott's point, if somebody did something one time and come in later and you say, well, why can't I get it? You got it. But I think it's nice to have a bright line if you can draw one.
Well, and that's, I mean, clearly that's why we were a little hesitant in regard to the town employees, because you're not supposed to replace work that could be done by a town employee with CPA money. Now, that's why I think we look for an opportunity to do it outside of their normal work and as a not volunteer in terms of their pay, but not obliged to do the work. They
Right.
could
Optional
option.
overtime.
But the committee looked at that and said to the proponent, it gets tricky for us as a committee, because if we open this door, where else might it lead down the road? And in terms of, you know, the town employees doing work that's paid for out of CPA, so we thought we should be careful with that one.
Yeah, and the prevailing wage, I was looking to see if I could find it because I just did my recertification through MCPPO, and they actually talked about leases to nonprofits and nonprofits doing work on public property. And I believe prevailing wage does apply. So it's because it's still town-owned property. So it would actually have to be sold. There might be some leeway there. I was trying to find the
Yeah.
citation I had.
So it's what we got from Stuart was, but there are definitely rules from the state's procurement and prevailing wage laws that are different from municipal property that is leased. And this article on the website
Okay.
has some information, and I haven't researched this because, you know, we're not utilizing that issue this time around necessarily, but it did seem as though that was a question that we wanted to continue to
Explore.
pursue.
Yeah, I'd be interested in the link.
I'll
too,
send you this
Tim.
one, yeah.
Thank you. Because you do these courses, it's 3 days in a row. And so I just remember them talking about it, but there was a nuance to it that I was trying to see, that I wrote down, and I'm wondering if maybe that has it.
So this paragraph from the article is the key. He says, when a leasing entity is doing work on a municipal asset, often procurement rules still apply, but prevailing wage does not. Depends on the exact situation. An opinion from municipal council or the Attorney General's office would be advisable when a private leasing entity is doing work on a municipal asset. So, you know, I'm not certain that it's
Well, and I
gonna
may be
play out.
mixing up procurement and prevailing wage too, because they go hand in hand always in my mind, but I know there was some nuance, so that seems
Yeah.
like it might make sense.
So I don't know, you know, it's just,
It's worth looking
we
into.
we keep trying to figure out where the opportunities are. I mean, so CPA, you know, when you begin to look at land acquisition or the tennis courts you know, the potential to do some improvements there on South Common for rec. You know, the money has made a big difference across the board in a number of opportunities that we wouldn't have pursued otherwise. I mean, I think we're all convinced of the fact that the opportunities just wouldn't have been there, particularly when you can use the money to match. So,
Well, it's a great fiscal planning tool.
Mm.
yeah, and one of the things that we've noticed with like Groton and Concord, and we talked about this at our meeting last night, was that we're going to ask these different entities, the Housing Trust and the Historic Commission and Rec and Conservation Commission, to begin to try to forecast longer than just like a year out or 2 years out. We really want them to begin to look out into the future 5 or 6 years with potential projects. And then that enhances in the long run our opportunity to apply for matching money, particularly if it's included in things like the open space plan or, I mean, we were working on the hazard mitigation plan recently, and we're trying to include all sorts of things in that make sure that any funding agency would say, oh, well, you've been thinking about this for quite a while. Good job. And so we could perhaps capture some of that money that's out there, because we certainly need it. Right? Never.
All right, any other questions? Thanks. All right, well, thank you.
Well, you're very kind, and thank you for your service, because you have the least enviable job in town, as far as I'm concerned, for many of the committees, right? Clearly, it's just,
It's a tough one.
I mean, I'm on all the fun committees, and I think to myself, holy mackerel.
Sorry, Heidi. The only good thing you can say about it, Tim, is it gets really condensed into the January to March timeframe.
Is that the benefit? Yeah.
Well, yeah, the rest of the year.
Well,
like,
Not
I
for me.
know that I and a lot of people appreciate what you guys do, because it's not easy stuff, and you're doing a great job. So,
Okay, thank you.
all right, I'll get out of here.
Yeah.
All right, next up are the TA items.
Right. This is relatively straightforward. Well, I'm not going to share this one because it's an increase of $78, which is 2%, but I will share everything else. The first budget we're going to talk about is Department 122, which is the Select Board elected salaries. They are going up 2%, which is a total of $78.
No, I don't know if we can handle that.
I'm not sure, but that is the,
I think we should-
that is the request per the town administrator's memo that requested everyone go up by 2%. And that's it under select board now, because we moved everything else under town administrator, since it's one office serving
Right.
both, and splitting expenses between the two was a little bit challenging to divide rather.
Yeah, it doesn't make sense.
Doesn't really serve.
So Peg doesn't have to support this. She doesn't have to get up and explain.
No, she's not.
She's-
Yeah.
I don't know, I think we should make her do it
I
anyway.
think so. Doesn't even know I'm
not.
talking about her.
I am gonna share the town administrator budget one, so just give me a second, because I'm doing double duty here. Where's my share, and we want to share this. Yay, it appears to be on the screen. All right, let me just get rid of all these little lovely little messages it gives me. Yeah, I think it's because I have to have the YouTube on my computer, so I have to be logged into Zoom. Yeah, so it kind of makes it, oh, no, you know, you need to go smaller. There we go. Okay. So this is the town administrator's amended budget request for FY 26. The full-time salary line item consists of the town administrator as well as the administrative assistant to the town administrator, as they are both salaried positions. As of right now, only the administrative assistant to the TA's salary is going up by 2% because the town, it's so weird to talk about myself in the third person. I am in the process of negotiating my contract with the select board.
You and June want to switch seats?
Yeah, do you want to talk about that? It's a little long. Yeah, I could do yours. You could present mine. No? Okay. But yes, as I am in contract negotiations, typically how we've done it is put in what the existing FY 25 is. Or if your current contract provides for a COLA, mine does not, then you put in for that. So I have left it at the FY 25 level, which is 148,000. That will potentially change. It's a weird conversation. All right, any questions on town administrator office salaries?
No, it makes sense. I
Okay.
looked at it earlier.
Now we move to our newest budget category that we added last year, which is the HR expenses. And if you recall, we had sort of parked some funding in there for the union negotiations, which were ongoing with the police department. We also wanted those expenses to represent if we had to do a vacation payout for a departing employee, perhaps if there was a cost associated with advertising or other type of onboarding HR expense that we needed to cover, if we had to do a physical, things of that nature.
Recruiter cost, could that go in there too? No, was that, I forget what we talked about last year.
So when you
That was part of
recruit
it.
for your new town administrator, no, I'm just kidding. I gotta keep it light. You probably, it could, but I think that if you had to do like a recruitment, I don't see fortunately any on the horizon, that would probably be like an unanticipated reserve fund transfer because it would be a mid-year expense unless you knew someone was retiring and then you could plan for it and you could put it in there.
Yeah, I just had a vague recollection that we had done something like that within the last year or two. And
I
it was probably a
think
reserve fund transfer.
when you did the town administrator search, for me, there was funding added to consulting, I think. Wasn't that where the money went for MRI? I've seen the old budget and I think you did add in some funding in anticipation.
Yeah.
So yeah, you could do it there. I think that would probably be either that or consulting. It is a consultant, so we would have the conversation probably with June and I about where the most appropriate places to put that funding. So what I'm proposing is taking $45,000 out of that line item. And that helps to offset the increase, if you recall, on the police budget, which was $180,000 increase, but not completely because we knew that we had the funding available in this line item depending on the outcome of negotiations. So I think it's really important to point that out. When we're building a budget and we're in negotiations, we obviously can't say, hey, we've got $45,000, or 55 or whatever it is, because you can't show your cards when you're doing negotiations, but it was pre-planned all along to set aside some funding to help offset what we knew would be an increased contractual cost on the police side, largely driven by trying to fully fund the educational incentives, which the select board and myself were supportive of doing as an attraction and retention. So the police budget increase really is offset by that $45,000. This is just an important thing to keep in mind. And then consulting remains level. Really, the only thing we are using for consulting is Weston and Sampson provide LSP or licensed site professional services. They help to review anything relative to soil importation and the implementation of our earthworks bylaws. Any questions on those? No? And then the expenses are level funded. We just rearranged them to more accurately reflect where the costs were coming out of. We realized that the advertising was not being expended at the amount that we had budgeted, nor the trash services, which for us are actually just the we probably should put shredder. It's the hallway shredding that we have, the 2 large locked bins in the hallway. Every time those get picked up, which isn't all that often. It's an $85 charge for the shredding bins. And we've been trying to encourage employees to really only put sensitive documents in there. It's not like just a bin to dump your recycle bin in, you know, it's if something has social security numbers on it, et cetera, that's where to go. Postage, we did not use nearly as much over the past few years as we had budgeted, but printing copy job costs have gone up, along with almost everything else. And then the travel and meetings budgets were woefully under reflective of what was actually being spent. So we basically just reallocated funding between those line items to have a level funded expense total of $13,765. Which brings the total department request to actually $43,565 less, because you're taking the 45,000 out of the HR expense line item. Any questions here?
Anyway,
That's good.
okay.
All right, I do have one supplemental funding request, and this was a little odd because I wasn't entirely sure where to put it. So it is attached to our budget, and I recognize that this is not an exceptional time to ask for these types of things, but I feel like I wanted to put it on your radar, even if it's something that we're not able to fund this year. I have been talking to Tim Wheeler for several years now about our need for some type of assistance on the planning, land use, economic development side. I did have a conversation with Central Mass Regional Planning Commission, and I said, if we were to do this, we would be looking at a higher level planner who could work with the planning board, work with the EDC, actually help to shepherd projects through the land use process, because we have so many, as you've heard, CPA projects. And I'm really the only person that does the procurement, kind of overseeing of the contract and helping. CPA is a funding entity, but it sort of ends up being up to the agency who gets the funding to sort of manage those funds, which then reverts to me to make sure that we're procuring, doing prevailing wage, contracting correctly, and then managing the contract throughout the course of the project, paying invoices, making sure that deadlines and milestones are met. It is causing a delay in projects. I have a backlog of about 7 to 8 projects right now that need to be put out to bid just to even get that process started.
So Kristen, let me just jump in there.
Sure.
This is that question that Julie originally raised a few years back is, okay, CPA monies are for shorthand capital projects, right?
Right.
And you cannot use that money for ongoing operations.
Correct.
But in order to carry out the project, you need some of this kind of management, which then falls under town operations because it ends up with you as the procurement person on these things. So,
Procurement, contracting, yes, and project management.
so I don't know how you look at the supplemental request, thinking about all that. I mean, is
It's
there a
the hybrid.
way? But actually, that should be part of the project costs,
Hmm.
right?
It's not just
because-
CPA projects. There's a lot of ARPA projects too, just to be fair. It's not
And
just
they
CPA.
dovetail. I mean,
We just were talking CPA, so.
Yeah, but look at town center, it all dovetails, doesn't it? So-
Yes,
So
exactly.
you actually can't tease out that overall management of those projects, but I think on the straight up CPA projects, that really ought to be ought to be part of the estimate for the funding request.
Agreed. And I know,
What is needed to manage that because it is in the development phase. It's not in the, we're up and running operational phase.
so I know that was discussed at one point, having the admin get trained in procurement. They have a limited number of hours available
Yeah.
for that position, and it's so complicated. I make mistakes. I mean, it's, you know, and I've been doing it for 7+ years now. So for someone who works 5 hours a week, I feel like that's a bit of an unfair burden to maybe put on them, but
And CPA
perhaps.
Yeah, CPA is limited to 5% of whatever it is they're getting in, and that's going to be
Exactly.
variable year to year because of the state match. And also our revenues. they're gonna be variable, so.
Correct. But your
It's
point
hard
too, we have the ARPA projects, the CPA projects, and we just got the Complete Streets funding, which not even counting everything else going on in the downtown, Complete Streets alone is $750,000. And while, I was thrilled that we got that money, we also got $400,000 from Lori Trahan for the radio project. That's a huge project to manage. I am literally at the point where I cannot apply for any more grants because we don't have the staff capacity to manage the projects and the funding that we have right now. And so I sit there and watch them go in my inbox and go, especially because my background is in grant writing and grant management. So I can write the grants, but there's only one of me, so I can only do so many pieces. That's the challenge. So this would really be, and I talked to Tim and Carolyn a bit offline about this. They like the idea of possibly calling it a project coordinator, because that's sort of really what they would be doing. I'm not really wedded to the title one way or another. But really, if you kind of look at what I have here, it's what I was just mentioning, town land use matters, and this is a big one, ensuring all projects meet conservation planning and zoning requirements. I know when I came in, had a issue where something I thought had gone before conservation, a project had not, and we found that out after the fact, and I just don't want that to happen. And my area of expertise is not in land use. And so, really having somebody who is very well versed in the zoning would be very helpful. So anyhow, I did speak with CMRPC about getting basically a higher level planner for about 10 hours a week. And for about $20,000, we could do that. That would be somebody who would not be on our payroll, but rather as in a consulting role that I could funnel things to, and also work with planning board and EDC as they need things as well. So that's the project request.
Would this person be like a clerk of the works also, as far as on some of these projects are totally?
No, really, this would be more project management, not oversight in terms of construction requirements. Any project that really gets into a large amount and a complex, depending on the complexity of the project, the state will typically either require you to do a clerk of the works or a OPM, owner's project manager. I typically these folks wouldn't necessarily be qualified in the same way, but that would be an amazing thing to have too. Don't get me wrong. I have been leaning on the resources we have here with the building and zoning enforcement officer and trying to, utilize, like with the upstairs project, the fire chief and the police chief for project management. And it's a challenge because none of us are obviously construction experts, and we don't have any on staff. We don't have any engineers or architects that really can oversee these things. And it is quite costly to bring in consultants to do that as well. But I think we would have to look at that on a project by project basis.
Okay. Anything else?
That's it on there. All right, let me get done with that one. All right. So legal would be the next one. The good news that I have is we are trending low on legal costs for FY25 so far, and I'm going to knock on wood. There were two major drivers of the legal costs in FY23 and 24. Both of those matters have been closed out, which is good. And our day-to-day legal has always remained low. It was really the Highland Ridge matter and the River Bridge matter that were driving those legal costs up. And so those have both been resolved. I feel comfortable backing that down 25,000. And I should say at least, because the other option we could do is at one point legal was at 50,000, and then we came before the FinCom for reserve fund transfers. But I went and looked back. June was kind enough to give me the reserve fund balance and expenditures for the last 10 years. Some years you were getting really close to your cap because of largely legal costs. So just something to kind of think about and weigh out. But at least there's a minimum of a $25,000 savings that I feel comfortable giving back into the overall budget pool there. Any questions on legal?
So we're all set?
All right. Data systems is the next one. I also wear the hat of the IT director. So good news here as well. Took a hard look at our data costs, and I feel comfortable actually cutting this budget back by $13,388. And that is because we had a number of computers under lease agreements. They were like a lease to own, and those have all ended. We do now own those computers. And the next round of computers that are coming due for replacement, we were lucky enough to obtain a $25,000 state earmark for this year for IT, which we will be using to replace the next batch of computers. So we will need to take a look at this again in FY27 to see where we're at. But I also always allocate money in this budget to replace several computers per year. So that way it's not a giant ongoing expense, but we'll be able to do about 14 computers with the state funding, which is going to be great. I'm getting a quote right now, so I don't have the exact number because there's the cost of the computer and then the setup and everything that we do with CM Geeks. But let me just give you a little, snapshot of what goes into the data systems budget. We have our phone system for the town telephones. We have CM Geeks, who provides our managed service provider. They also do our endpoint detection monitoring, setup fees for new computers. We do allocate funding for that. Our Dell leases, as you can see, I was able to remove the funding from there. Spectrum, we couldn't figure out why that was in there because we hadn't paid a Spectrum bill all year.
I'd have to relook at it.
Yeah,
At one time, it was all the phone services.
okay, and I'm wondering if it migrated to TPX because we
I
looked
believe it did.
back over a couple years and there were no charges to Spectrum, so I zeroed that one
Originally, I
out.
think Cable. Is it?
Oh, yeah.
Through the cable system.
Okay, that would make sense. And then we went to voice over
Yeah.
IP or,
Yes.
okay, does that make sense?
Yeah, yes.
Really great IT director, as you can tell, because I know all of these things. Also, I should say the $5,000 for the computer setup fee. I just moved it into what I'm calling uncovered services and equipment, which are the computers, the setup fees and the accessories. They really kind of belonged, I felt, in one line item. So I rolled those together. And then we have our cost increases for the contracts. We also do the Google Workspace, copier and printer leases. We have Civics Plus, which is the town website. And we do 3 Zoom licenses, and we get both the regular Zoom and the webinar, which helps with the Zoom bombers because we can, promote people and keep people out. So it's worked really well. We haven't ended up on the news for having inappropriate meeting crashers. So I'll take that. So that's it for data systems. If anyone has any questions on that. We really sat and tried to look like, where can we carve off any money? Because we knew how tight the budget was going to be even while we were just building it. So at least there is a cost savings there. All right. And just a couple more little ones. Town report and communications, we're calling it, which is the Powder House News. So we went and looked at what we're actually spending per month because we have converted the Powder House News into a virtual and in-person pickup as opposed to being mailed to every household. However, you can request it be mailed to you, and we will do that. We have less than 25 people that have requested it to be mailed, which is consistent with what I was hearing, that you'd like find them all over the post office because people weren't necessarily wanting them. So we saved a lot of money on postage, and so we're actually able to go down $3,300 in that line item. And that includes continuing the monthly Powder House News. We print out about 250 copies. We put them in the library, 19 Carter downstairs, general store, so people can pick them up too. And it goes on the website. And so far, we've been doing it monthly since October. It seems to be well received, and would like to continue it. Any questions there?
No.
Like to see the savings part, right? That's always it's always a plus. And then the last couple, I think, are just our insurance line items, which I have good news on as well.
I didn't think those two words went in the same line.
Well, this is property liability and casualty, not health insurance. So we do workers' comp insurance. And this is both the regular workers' comp, for non-police and fire, as well as what's known as IOD, which is injured on duty, workers' comp, which covers the public safety, police and fire officials. Again, took a hard look at what was in the budget and what we've been spending, and we actually were able to get a 0% increase on our workers' comp because our claim levels were so low. And so we are able to go in at what we spend for FY 25 and take $10,000 out of that line item. Any questions on that one? So I'm trying to make those cuts wherever I can. I know they're little, but I feel like they add up after a while. And then the last one is our liability, property casualty and liability insurance. That is level funded. That was the 0% as well that we received, which was great. We actually signed on with Maya for another 2 years. They offered us a 0% for FY 26 and no more than a 2.5% increase for FY 27, which is fantastic. So it makes sense for us to sign on. Our claim levels are minimal, if any, knock on wood. So, that's some good news that we have there.
Did we move the deductibles here? Did we not?
Yes, actually, and I looked at where we were at and we had enough room. Initially, I was going to cut this budget back a little bit too. And I looked at where we were at. We have enough room for about $5,000 worth of deductibles built into here. Right now, if there is a vehicle damage, property damage, the department has been responsible for paying that deductible out of their budget, and that's obviously an unanticipated expense. I'm used to seeing deductibles come out of the insurance line item. I think it's a more logical place for it to be, and sometimes it ends up becoming an issue of blame of which department caused the incident and who we should ding for the money. And I just want to avoid that altogether because accidents happen. So this would allow us to take our property deductibles are $2,500, our vehicle deductibles are $1,000. So that would give us enough wiggle room here for $5,000 worth of deductibles, which should hopefully take care of anything we might need in the year. And that's it.
All right. Anything? We had no transfers, right?
Not yet. No. Good.
And next week we have schools,
Yes, we do.
Berlin, Boylston. I think they're the only ones on the agenda, right?
They are, and the week after that, it's Assabet, and I have I think them on the agenda as well, if I'm not mistaken. Yep, they each get their own week.
Okay, and we can hold off on who's going to capital planning. We can, debate, see if anybody wants to volunteer. Go from there. Any other items?
Just on the capital planning, make it easier. I can't do Thursday nights.
Okay.
Standing conflict.
All right. I think we're all set.
All set.
All right, motion to adjourn. All right, all those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Okay, we're off YouTube. Just give me a moment